Hey, what's up guys? Chris McKinney from Raze Motorsports. Today we're going to install a Ninja Backup kit on a 16 Yamaha YZ450 with a Yeti 120 kit. I got my buddy JD, he's a car chief from the 5R Energy NASCAR team. Let's get started. Alright, so the tools that you're going to need to install your Yamaha Ninja Backup kit on your Yeti is an 8mm, a 3/8, an 18 and a 16mm socket. It's always nice to have an electric ratchet. As far as combination wrenches, you're going to need a 7/16 and a 3/8, a 10, a 13, a 14, 15, 16, and an 18. Pop rivet gun, square nose pliers, needle nose pliers, 15 hex, a snap punch, marker, and a pair of dikes to cut the zip ties. You're going to need a 3, 4, and 6 Allen, a 3/16 drill bit, a 1/4" drill bit, and a 7/16 drill bit. So in the Yamaha Ninja Backup kit, you get your nitrous base bracket, your harness with your line, top caps, Raze Motorsports ECU, your bottom brackets for your bottom backing plates for your nitrous bracket, all your hardware, your jet, nozzle. You get a thermostat kit with a return line and a bypass, a 5-pound bottle. So we're going to start out with taking the seat and the intake cowl off. So grab your 10mm. Next you grab an 8mm, take both side panels off.
Alright, next we're gonna lift the fuel tank up, spin it 180. You can go ahead and leave all of the stuff, all of the lines and wires connected to this. We'll just spin it and set it up here. 8mm, a couple of the bolts already came out with your plastic. Buzz this bolt out and we'll lift it and spin it.
So this is a Raze bike. We don't have the stock ECU with us. We're actually out tuning in West Yellowstone. The stock ECU is back at the shop in Wisconsin. But the next step would be to remove the stock ECU. Just a little push lock right here, push it down, unplug it. Alright, next we're going to take the intake off. And to do that, you're going to grab your 3mm Allen. Go ahead and loosen this up. If you want, you can take a piece of cardboard, put it in front of the radiator so you don't bend over any of the fins, or just be careful.
Alright, once the clamp off the top side of the throttle body is loose, you can go ahead and disconnect the coil wires. Lift the connector off. There's 3 bolts on the top, 8mm socket. Once these 3 bolts are out, there's an intake air temperature sensor that's on the bottom side of this over here. You can't get to it until you start to lift this off, and you might have to work this a little bit because it's obviously still got a tight connection to the top of the throttle body. Alright, once all of our bolts are off, coil's disconnected, roll this out of the way. Intake air temp sensor right here. Push, pull. Air box comes out.
So set your intake up on the bench, the workbench, and you're going to want to mount your jet in this second square over here. So see the orientation of this coil? You're just going to take a mark. Now this intake already has a hole in it, so you would mark it, and you would take a 7/16 drill bit and drill the hole. Alright, now that you've got your hole drilled in your intake, we're going to install the bushing, the nut, and the nozzle. So first things first, this is extremely important. Looking at your nozzle, see that hole right there? Once we install this into the bushing, you're going to lose the position of that hole. So you need to make a mark on the nut so you know where it is. You're then going to take the bushing, stick it from the inside out. Your kit's going to come with a smaller tube of Loctite. Go ahead and drop a little Loctite on it. Take your nut, tighten it down. Nut's an 18, the bushing is a 16. Now we're going to install the nozzle. So you're going to put a drop of Loctite on the threads, thread it in. Now, the nozzle needs to point at the back of the throttle body. If this ends up pointing some other direction, the motor's not going to get proper nitrous. So you're going to thread it in. You're going to tighten it until your mark is pointing at the back of the throttle body. We're then going to take your arming switch and install it right next to your left grip. So after you get the arming switch put on, you're going to run the wires with some zip ties in the factory location. We're going to drop the coolant out of it. Reinstall the coolant bolt. You're going to take it on the high pressure hose and put a mark with a black marker right here after this bend. Then you're going to remove this hose off the bike. Once you have the hose removed, take this rash guard off of the hose. Where the rash guard was, we're going to go a 1/4 inch behind it and we're going to take this section out. So we're going to go ahead and cut it here, and cut it here, throw this piece away. So now we're going to assemble the thermostat and the return coupler, 3/16 Allen, 12mm wrench, 13 and 14. We're going to go ahead and put thread sealant on every thread. The thermostat is going to end up sitting in the bike like this, and the valve goes first. The 90 goes into the valve. We're going to put a plug on the other side. Unless you have a Thermatec temp gauge, and you would put the temp sensor here on the back side of the thermostat. On the return coupler, we're going to do the plug on one side, and we're going to do the straight fitting on the other side. So go ahead and put that all together. So this is how the parts should look when they're finished. The return coupler, plug on the one side, Army Navy fitting on the front, the thermostat, plug in the rear, temp control valve facing the bottom with a 90°, and it's going to end up fitting into the bike just like so. So you got easy access, reach down and control the temperature of your handlebars. This is how the thermostat should look when it's assembled and ready to go. Oetker clamps. So this small hose right here that we're looking at, this is the low pressure side, low flow side I mean. We're going to put the return coupler in this hose. You can see where I've marked it right there in the middle. You're going to stay away from the heat guard. Go ahead and make a mark and then remove this hose out of the bike. We're now going to cut the hose, the return hose. Notice how I've got a mark for orientation pointing up towards the handlebars. We're going to go ahead and we're going to mark 3/4 inch and remove that section out of the hose. So go ahead and cut it. Now that you get the hose cut, we're going to go ahead and install the return coupler into the hose. We're going to make the Army Navy fitting point straight up, so follow your alignment mark, and then you're going to use the smaller Oetker clamps supplied in the kit, and I always like to put the clamp facing down. This is how the return coupler should look when it's fully assembled.
Make sure it's not touching or rubbing on anything. It's clear. There's enough air gaps behind everything. Return coupler, same thing. Make sure nothing's rubbing. It's opened.
Alright, so now that your thermostat and return coupler is installed, if you've got the handlebars, then you would have followed the handlebar instructions and mounted your lines for your handlebars to your thermostat and return coupler. If you're not running the handlebars and you've got just a Ninja Backup kit that came with a bypass line, that 8-inch line that came with the kit, you just connect the thermostat to the return coupler, tighten it down. Alright, so next we're going to install the base bracket for the nitrous bottle. So you can put this anywhere on the chassis you want. Being on a Yeti with the fuel can, we mount it to the rear. First thing you're going to do, set it down and line it up. This chassis already had this bracket put on, so the holes are already there, but you're going to start out and you do one hole at a time. So you can take a snap punch, punch your hole, take the bracket off. Now with carbon fiber, you're drilling a 3/16 hole for your rivet, but you're always going to want to step up. So start out with a small drill, run it through, change out to a 3/16, run it through. Set your bracket back down, drop in a bolt, snap punch your next hole, and once you've got 2 or 3, you can center punch the rest of them, drill them out.
Now that all your holes are drilled, go ahead and run your hardware down through the tunnel. You have these backing plates, lock washers, 4mm Allen and a 3/8 socket. Once again, always a good idea to go ahead and start all of these before you tighten any of the hardware. Now it's time to go ahead and set your bottle in. The mount comes with these rubber O-rings installed in here, kind of support the mount. Go ahead and set the bottle down with the pressure relief valve straight up and the outlet straight down. Center it up in the mounts where the decal fits evenly in between the mounts, and go ahead and push down in there snug. It'll fit nice and tight in there. Next you can install the top clamp, same deal. They have the same O-rings on them, so they also fit nice and snug.
After you get the bottle in, go ahead and hook up the high pressure line from the bottle to the nitrous manifold. So after the bottle's on, the line's hooked up, I just wanted to say that the kit that you will actually be receiving, this is our display model that we had to get done right away for the shows. This pressure sensor is actually clocked up and back, so if it's rolled over, you can't break it off. This gauge is now on the inside, so you can be viewing the pressure from the other side. This is just to tell you how much is left in the bottle, but in the tight trees or if you roll it over on rocks or real hard ice, there's a chance that this could break, so we moved it to the inside. Next, JD's going to show you how to run the wire and the nitrous line up to the motor.
Alright, now we're going to run the wires and the nitrous line up the tunnel. Best thing to use a marker or something like that. This obviously doesn't have to be quite as precision as the mounts because there's a little bit of flex. So
use your snap punch.
Yeah. So basically, lay this out to where you like it on your bike. This we've already had this previously installed, so this is just kind of a demonstration here. You know, lay this out. Use a marker. Mark where you'd like it to go. Take your punch through it, or make a mark, and then go ahead and drill your 3/16 holes all the way up, mounting nice and straight. A good idea when drilling carbon is to start with a nice small pilot hole and work your way up. Seems to get the best results.
Alright, so after you get your holes drilled, you're going to put your Cushman clamps onto the line, pull the line somewhat snug, put your rivet down through. Now if you can fit your hand up underneath to put the backing plate on, do it that way. If you've got big forearms, you're gonna have to pop out these 2 back bolts, lift the tunnel up, that way you can reach and get the backing plates. But JD can fit his hand up there, so he's gonna put the backing on.
All right.
And I'll set the rivet.
So now you got your 3/16 rivets installed, your line running the way that you like it. We're going to go ahead and fish the rest of the wiring up. This particular bike, the brake line runs right here, so we're going to go ahead and just run these wires nicely right along the brake line. Run right along the frame here, up towards the top of the motor. Your ECU mounts about right here, as you'll see in a minute, and your nitrous line is going to go in here as well. Once the lines are at the top, we'll go ahead and put a couple tie wraps around the harness where it lays nice. So once you get your wires tied to your frame and up here towards the top of the motor, it's always a good idea. This kit comes with an extra long nitrous line, so it's always a good idea to go ahead and test fit. It's this particular bike, it's hard to see the nozzle, so go ahead and just kind of lay this thing into position where it's going to go. You don't have to get it all the way in there, and just get an idea. Your ECU is going to sit here, which you'll see in a second, so kind of hold this to where these wires are going to attach to your ECU and nicely route this in towards your nozzle.
So now we're going to install the nitrous line to the intake. You're going to slide your nitrous nut on first, then the ferro, and then the jet. You're going to need a 3/8 and a 7/16.
Go ahead and put a little bit of Loctite on the threads, just a dab will do.
When you're installing this, you need to pay extreme attention to the mark that you put on the nozzle earlier. If you tighten this up and spin that nozzle, like I said, you won't get the right nitrous into the bike. So hold it from spinning and only snug it. If you lock this down too hard, the ferrule is going to crimp down and pinch the nitrous line off. So just a little snug and the red Loctite will hold it in place. Before dropping the intake in place, grab your nitrous activation wires, run it right down into the frame. I'm sorry, right through here with the factory harness. Plug it in.
We're ready to drop our intake back in. It's important to go ahead and connect your intake air temp first. You'll get it down in there, and it's almost impossible to get to once it's down in there. So go ahead and connect that. Slide it down in there. Make sure, he's going to make sure it slides onto the throttle body. It's kind of a bear to get to that.
You're in. Once it's on, grab your 3mm Allen and tighten it back to the throttle body. Alright, so now we're going to install the ECU. Plugged in our 2 pigtails. And I'm going to plug the coil back in. It's very important, this nitrous line. These bikes have a harmonics when they run, so they'll vibrate on stuff and rub through. So make sure it's not rubbing on anything. We put the spark plug wire and all the wires on top, run it down low. Once you've done that, drop your spark plug back in. Grab your ECU, plug it into the main harness. snap it in place. Once it snaps in place, take the rubber, drop it over the side. Then you're going to take these wires, we're going to zip tie the extra because this is a short track. Zip tie real nice and then put the gas tank back in.
Now it's time to go ahead and rotate your gas tank back into place, but before you do that, after you put your ECU on and your rubber mount here, make sure that the rubber piece is not covering up the baro sensor on the back side of this. It's the little black thing with the white center. You'll be able to see that before you snap it into place. This one was obviously correct. The fuel tank sits down in there. You can go ahead and put this bolt in with your 8mm. The other two mounts, the bolts that hold the plastic on, also go through those holes. Alright, now we can go ahead and reinstall our side plastics. 8mm socket we'll go ahead and is what you need for all these bolts. As we talked about earlier, one of the bolts for this also is the top bolt for your fuel tank. We'll go ahead and leave all these just snug for the time being until we make sure they all start. And once they're all started, we can go back and tighten them. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the cowl induction. Once your vent's snapped in, go ahead and install your seat. 10mm socket, 2 bolts, one on either side. You're ready to go.
Alright guys, so that's how you install your Ninja Backup kit on your 2016 YZ450 with a Yeti. All you gotta do is get your bottle filled. Remember, switch your ECU into armed mode. It's going to start looking for all the parameters if it's safe to spray. Engine's got to be up to operating temperature. It's not going to spray it in first gear. Got to be above 2,000 feet in altitude. If you're above 6,000 RPMs, 65% throttle input, you'll get your spray. We use this as a crank accelerator. So the ECU will shut the nitrous off in the background, even though you're at full throttle. At 10,500 RPMs. So it's going to come on at 6, shut off at 10.5. If you're climbing hills in 3rd gear, holding it wide open, your nitrous is going to shut off in the background. If you're climbing in 4th or even using 5th sometimes, you will be using the bottle. You got about 10 to 15 minutes of spray. With the ECU shutting off in the background all the time, you should be able to get a weekend out of 1 bottle. So have fun. If you have any questions doing your install, give me a shout on my cell anytime, or hit Taylor right up in the email.